Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to this side event at the Bonn Intersessionals on accelerating the HFC phase down to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius pathways. My name is Nathan Borgford-Parnell. I am the Science Affairs Coordinator for the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and I have to say I'm very happy to be here. HFCs and controlling HFCs quickly is near and dear to my heart. When I was a newly minted international environmental attorney from the United States, my first job was to support negotiations in the Montreal Protocol in what eventually led to being the Kigali Amendment, which was passed in 2016. It's where I began, and it's where my heart will always lie. The Kigali Amendment to control production and consumption of HFCs was special in many ways, one of, not least of which, was that HFCs are not ozone-depleting substances, and the Montreal Protocol was originally formed with the exclusive purpose of managing ozone-depleting substances. The Kigali Amendment really was not the first time that the Montreal Protocol really took on, in a direct way, supporting climate mitigation, because all ODSs are also greenhouse gases, and many of the first that were managed back in the late 80s and early 90s were many tens of thousands of times more powerful than CO2 at warming the climate. But the Kigali was really quite important because HFCs are not ozone depleting, as I said. So it was really a full step into the climate space to support the community that we're addressing here in the UNFCCC. The latest analysis from the Velders team, who are a premier modeling team that supports Montreal Protocol negotiations, have indicated that uncontrolled HFC growth, pre-Kigali growth, would have led to potentially almost half a degree of warming by the end of this century. Which is really quite substantial when you consider it's only about 2% of total warming currently. It's quite a small greenhouse gas in the grand scheme of things, but the growth expected is substantial going forward. The Kigali Amendment, while the controls for the amendment are only now being phased in, and great many countries will be freezing their consumption at baseline levels in 2 years, it's already done quite a bit of heavy lifting in terms of mitigation. And the policies and strategies and legislation that's been put in place post-Kigali, according to this new analysis, has actually cut the potential rate of warming, or the total cumulative warming at the end of the century, in half. So down to upward limit of about a quarter of a degree of warming from HFCs. Obviously, that's not enough. So full compliance with Kigali as it stands now will actually get us all the way down to an estimated 0.04 degrees of warming contributed by HFCs. That's just an impressive conclusion of a protocol that started not addressing climate at all and only really looks at consumption and production, doesn't manage emissions of these important greenhouse gases. However, within this context, in 2018, the IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees really underlined a conclusion that many of us in the scientific community have been pushing for quite some time, is that the temperature path that we follow in this century is just as important, if not more important, than the end point, particularly if you are equally interested in achieving sustainable development objectives that are linked to climate, that are linked to co-emissions from these sources of greenhouse gas pollutants. And it's within that frame that we are speaking here today. While Kigali, we fully expect it to work because all previous phase outs and management within that wonderful multilateral environmental treaty have been effectively managed. It is insufficient to only look at the benefit it provides at the end of this century. It's important to look at the benefits that it can provide from now going forward, particularly in the next couple of decades. So that's the frame in which we're looking at this. We're going to begin with a scientific presentation that looks specifically at reflect the ambition of Kigali in the frame of these 1.5 degree pathways, and then that's going to be followed by a raft of presentations and a moderated discussion from countries that have already started taking action and are interested in sharing best practices to help other countries take even more concerted action, even beyond the commitments in Kigali, to achieve substantially faster mitigation with substantial co-benefits for development and climate. So without further ado, I would like to present my esteemed colleague, Pallav Purohit, who is a senior research scholar at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis in Austria. If we have his presentation up there.
Thank you, Nathan, and a very good morning to you all. So, as Nathan has indicated in my presentation, I will briefly talk about Kigali Amendment. That will be helpful to those who are not familiar with it, and see if the Kigali Amendment is ambitious enough or not to support the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees centigrade. If not, then we will discuss the alternative pathways to achieve the Paris Agreement goal by accelerating the Kigali Amendment. As Nathan has indicated, the Kigali Amendment, it is an international agreement to gradually reduce the consumption and production of hydrofluorocarbons. And hydrofluorocarbons, I mean, these are basically the refrigerants used in cooling technologies, refrigeration, air conditioning, and heat pumps. And apart from this, they are also being used in other industrial sectors, such as aerosol propellant and foam blowing and fire extinguishing agent and solvents. The contribution of the HFCs in global greenhouse gas emissions is 1.5% only. However, they are the potent greenhouse gases, and the recent research shows that, I mean, the HFC consumption is increasing significantly, as we have seen in the past 2 decades, and that is primarily due to the HCFC phases out in Article 5 and non-Article 5 countries. Non-Article 5 countries have already completed. The second is the warming climate, and that's why, I mean, there is more use of cooling technologies and increasing wealth in the developing countries. HFCs are definitely, I mean, their ozone depleting potential is 0, and they are being managed under the Kigali Amendment. Next, please. So, the Kigali Amendment, it will phase down HFC consumption and emissions by 80 to 85% until 2050 by switching to low GWP or natural refrigerants such as CO2, ammonia, hydrocarbons, and HFOs. So far, 134 parties ratified the Kigali Amendment. So in 2016, I mean, the parties to the Montreal Protocol, they reached agreement at their 28th meeting of the parties to phase down HFCs. And the parties to the Montreal Protocol, they agreed to add HFCs to the list of controlled substances and approved a timeline for their gradual reduction by 80 to 85% by the late 2040s. And it entered already into force from 1st of January 2019. So the Kigali Amendment, it has different baselines and phasing down schedules for its party groups. So in Montreal Protocol, we had, developed countries and developing countries. Mostly developed countries are non-Article 5 countries, and developing countries are Article 5 countries. In Kigali Amendment, they are further subdivided into 2 groups. For example, the developing countries or Article 5 countries, they are subdivided into Group 1 and Group 2. So the Group 1 consists of mainly China and most of the developing countries, and the Group 2, it consists of India and other hot countries in South Asia and Middle East. Similarly, in case of non-Article 5 countries or industrialized countries, there are also 2 groups. One is the earlier started, like the EU, US, Canada, and other industrialized countries. And then that is called the earlier starter. And there is another later starter, that is Russian Federation and Belarus. So the initial steps for both, I mean, they are more or less, they are different in case of non-Article 5 countries. But the final steps are same. I mean, both earlier starter and later starter, they have to achieve 85% reduction to their respective baseline by 2036. In case of Article 5 countries, both, Group 1 and Group 2, the Group 1, it has a freeze year of 2024, and Group 2, it has a freeze year of 2028. And the baseline, they also have a different baseline, like for the Group 1, that include China and most of the developing countries. The baseline is an average of 2020 to 2022, and for Group 2 countries, the baseline is 2024 to 2026. Next, please. So, using the GAINS modeling framework, that is the greenhouse gas, air pollution, and interaction and synergies model developed by IIASA, we have estimated HFC emissions in the baseline, Kigali Amendment, and maximum technically feasible reduction scenario. The MTFR scenario is nothing but a kind of best available technology scenario, irrespective of the cost constraints. So what we have seen is that the baseline HFC emissions were estimated at 4.21 gigatons CO2 equivalent in 2050 and 6.21 gigatons CO2 equivalent by 2100. And if you look at the Kigali Amendment scenario, it will reduce 87% of cumulative HFC emissions between 2019 to 2100. And the MTFR scenario will reduce more than 97% of HFC emissions between 2019 to 2100. Next, please. So here, what we have observed is that full compliance with the Kigali Amendment is expected to achieve a 56% reduction in HFC emissions by 2050 compared to the 2010 level. Whereas the 1.5 degree centigrade consistent scenario used in the IPCC special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade, it includes a 75 to 80% reduction in HFC emissions by 2050 as compared to the 2010 level, along with deep and simultaneous reductions of CO2 and all non-CO2 climate forcing emissions. So here, in the right side, you can see that with the Kigali Amendment, the black bar, it shows that, the reduction is possible up to 56%, whereas for the 1.5 degree centigrade consistent scenario, we need a reduction of 75 to 80%. So now the question is that, what will be the 1.5 degree centigrade consistent pathway? Next, please. So for this, we have developed alternative scenario. So under the Kigali Amendment, as I have already discussed, that Article 5, in developing countries, Group 1 and Group 2 countries, they have a different freeze year and different baseline. So as a natural choice, what we have assumed in the first scenario is aligning Article 5 Group 1 and Group 2 countries. Next, please. Now, in the second scenario, both Article 5 and non-Article 5 party groups, they follow the Kigali Amendment phase-down schedules, but step up ambition in their final phase-down steps, and that is the non-Article 5 party groups, they will have 85% reduction in 2036, and starting in 2036, for non-Article 5, with Article 5 following only in the year 2050, to 95% below baseline in the year 2050. So here we assume that the ultimate steps by 2050 will be 95% reduction below the respective baseline of the party groups. And next, please. So in the next scenario, we have combined the Article 5 Group 1 and 2 alignment scenario, as well as the 95% reduction scenario. Next, please. So I apologize, for the busy slide. And here you can see the milestones in the history of stratospheric ozone depletion. So here you can see the events, they represent the occurrence of important scientific findings, the completion of international scientific assessment report, such as the SAP report, and the milestones of the Montreal Protocol. So the Montreal Protocol, it began with the Vienna Convention, for the protection of the ozone layer in 1985. It is widely considered as the most successful environmental protection agreement so far. So the Montreal Protocol, it basically utilizes a kind of start and strengthen approach, wherein, the ODSs were controlled in an orderly and transparent schedule. They will be phased out in an orderly and transparent schedule, which is regularly evaluated and strengthened as market innovate and adjust. So what we have done as a next step is that following the Montreal Protocols, this start and strengthen approach, we have developed another scenario, the final scenario, that fast-tracking HFC phase down under the Kigali Amendment, it would result in additional reduction that is important for supporting the Paris climate goals. And this would also increase chances of staying below 1.5 degrees centigrade additional warming throughout the century. Next, please. So finally, if the combined scenario is accelerated, as you can see here, with a more ambitious target timeline, and we name this as accelerated combined scenario, with non-Article 5 countries achieving 95% reduction already in 2036, and Article 5 countries starting earlier and achieving 95% reduction in 2045. And this scenario almost follows the example of accelerated phase down of SCFCs under the Montreal Protocol, that initially, the final step was 2040, and it was accelerated to 2030 for Article 5 countries. Next, please. So here, you can see HFC emissions in the baseline and alternative scenario. So we have already discussed the pre-Kigali baseline scenario and Kigali Amendment and MTFR scenario. And then you can see 4 additional lines showing the alternative scenario that I have just shown here. So the scenarios, I have shown here that the accelerated phase down scenario is most ambitious as compared to other scenarios, because if we look at the cumulative emissions, they are high, cumulative emissions, they are lowest in this case, and the reduction is highest in this case. Next, please. And here, in the right-hand side, you can see the 2050 emissions. And initially, if you look at the Kigali Amendment scenario, the emissions are beyond the box. That is the range, 75 to 80% reduction below the 2010 level. And even in the Article 5 Group 1 and 2 alignment scenario, you can see that it is not able to achieve, the mitigation required for the 1.5 degree centigrade consistent scenario. And in case of this 95 degree centigrade, percentage scenario, combined scenario, and accelerated phase down scenario, it is possible to achieve the PA target. And at the same time, this accelerated phase down scenario, that is more ambitious, because in this case, we have we will lower the cumulative emissions. Next, please. Finally, here, what is the takeaway message is that hydrofluorocarbon emissions have increased rapidly, and they are being managed under the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. And second observation, what we have seen here is that the current ambition of the Kigali Amendment, it is not consistent with the 1.5 degree centigrade agreement goal. And using the start and strengthen approach of the Montreal Protocol on refrigerant management, it shows that accelerated HFC phase down under the Kigali Amendment, it could result in additional reduction of 72% in 2050. If we only look annual emissions, and it also increases the chances of staying below 1.5 degrees centigrade throughout this century. So I will stop here, and I would like to thank you for your patience. And if you have any comment and questions, I will be happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pallav. A lot of food for thought. Now I want to pivot to a number of country examples of action that's taking place, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. Starting with, actually, let me get prepared before I do the introduction. I'll get your presentation in place. Naomi Inoue, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize. Okay, I practiced it a little bit. Deputy Director of the Office of Climate Change Negotiations at Global Environment Bureau at the Ministry of Environment of Japan. He's going to be talking about their fluorocarbon life cycle management initiative and its future perspectives. So, please, sir, take it away.
Hello. Is it audible? Okay. Thank you for your introduction, Nathan. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Naomi, and I'm very happy to be here. And first of all, I'd like to extend my appreciation to the organizers of CCAC and IIASA and UNEP Coalition and then other distinguished guest speakers. I'm very happy to be here. Japan has been in a good cooperation with CCAC, and especially we think that covering all of the GHGs in the NDC is very important, especially HFCs, of course, and the methane. Such gases are very important. And then how can we do this is should draw attention, and then now it's gathering attention of the world. So I think it is very good timing to have this meeting to share our experiences. So yeah, Japan has implemented various activities to address the bank issues of HFCs and other fluorocarbons gases, to contribute to the Paris Agreement ambition and supplementing Kigali Amendment. So, and yeah, we need to do more on top of the Kigali Amendment activities. So that's, and then here is to share what we are doing. So the next slide here, to start with, let me briefly introduce Japan's NDC target in 2030 and long-term goal in 2050. And HFCs emissions reduction. Japan has committed to reduce GHG emissions by 46% in 2030 and will continue strenuous effort in challenge to meet the lofty goal of cutting its emission by 50%. It's very complicated, but basically 46 is our NDC. But there is a political message, a strong message to say that we will keep on heading for 50%. That is very ambitious, but we will do that. That's a political message. But anyway, that is NDC for 2030, and Japan will aim for a net zero emission by 2050. As for HFCs emissions, Japan aims to reduce by 55% by 2030, and through implementing life cycle management approach, which is the topic I would like to deliver today. Next, please. Here, let me introduce the concept of life cycle management of the HFC with the example of our domestic efforts. Life cycle management aims at controlling HFCs in all stages, namely reducing consumption and preventing leakage while in use, recovery from appropriate collection, and destruction and recycling at the final stage. In the upstream, Japan's ozone layer protection law has been implemented to phase out CFCs and HCFCs and to phase down HFCs. So that's what we had been doing for years. But life cycle management is to cover the rest parts of the cycle. Next, please. So the Montreal Protocol only controls the production and consumption of fluorocarbons, which is the upstream of the life cycle. Japan recognizes that it is crucial to control furthermore in the middle and downstream of the life cycle. As HFCs filled in refrigerators and air conditioners already in the market, so-called HFC bank, contribute, and then that continues to be leaked and released into the atmosphere without proper management. And that's what we are seeing, and that's what we will continue seeing in the future. In this regard, Japan strengthened the Act on Rational Use and Proper Management of Fluorocarbons in 2020 to address the those emissions. Next, please. Here is a scientific projection of fluorocarbons. The Kigali Amendment has, most part has been introduced by our guest speakers, Pallav. But just to quickly touch upon, Kigali Amendment has contributed to control production and consumption of HFC, and emission is expected to increase approximately 2 billion tons CO2 equivalent due to the bank. And the global cooling demand is rapidly growing, in particular in developing countries. In this case, while promoting natural and low GWP refrigerant, which is global warming potential, low global warming potential refrigerant is important. And then we believe it is necessary to deploy the bottom and downstream measures to control existing HFCs through life cycle management. Next, please. Based on this recognition, our environmental minister, former minister, Mr. Koizumi, called for joint efforts by establishing the Initiative on Fluorocarbons Life Cycle Management, and in short, IFL, addressing HFC bank issue and promoting natural and low GWP refrigerant and high energy efficient refrigeration, air conditioning equipments, and international cooperation for capacity building, investment, and raising climate change mitigation ambitions, and HFC-related NDC implementation in developing countries. 15 countries in international organization resonated to this call for action. And I'm very proud that Vietnam has been a very active partner from the beginning. And Cambodia joined in the IFL in February this year. So here I'd like to say thank you for your cooperation, and then I'm very looking forward to working together in this area. Next, please. Through the IFL, Japan has accelerated its efforts through policy dialogue for net zero emission and technological cooperation for capacity building, and investment on joint crediting mechanism, JCM, on HFC destruction. Recently, fluorocarbons life cycle management has been emphasized in the context of climate change mitigation towards net zero emissions in dialogue with ASEAN, India, Vietnam, and Philippines and Thailand. So it's the interest is growing. As to technical cooperation, we are very proud that Vietnam introduced life cycle management approach in recently revised law on environmental protection and decree on GHG emission reduction and ozone layer protection. Also in Cambodia, the IFL supported the Ministry of the Environment, Cambodia, and to develop technological manual for collection in destruction of HFCs in the local language. So I'm very happy to share our experiences with all of you, and in the later on discussion, if time allows. And next, please. I'm excited here to inform you that the launch of the resource book for good practice of policy measures as one of the first contributions to the cooling hub of CCAC. It contains various examples and cases and then information. So for these contents, Mr. Kato, sitting next to me, will of OECC, he will introduce in his presentation later on. So lastly, you can visit our YouTube channel if you are interested. We have uploaded a number of videos regarding international seminars and policy technology guidance as well. So thanks for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions from the audience in our discussion. Without further ado, though, I'd like to pass it over to Makoto Kato. He's the principal researcher of the Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center of Japan.
Thank you, Nathan. Good morning, colleagues. As Naomi-san mentioned, we're pleased to launch the resource book for life cycle management of fluorocarbons. This is a joint effort with CCAC and also the government of Japan, Ministry of the Environment, Japan. So I would like to briefly introduce the contents of this resource book. The next slide, please. So as you already know that, as we mentioned already, we are pretty keen on controlling HFCs and other refrigerants, which are powerful global warming gases. And I think the Kigali Amendment is good, but it's basically only covering the consumption and also the international trade. So that through the life cycle management, we have to actually take care of all of these things until the destruction or final disposal. So that is actually the thing which is very important for the achievement of the Paris goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then many countries are now working on the HFC-related nationally determined contributions. So I think to implement this NDCs by reducing HFCs, it's important that countries need to introduce policies and measures in domestic administration. The next slide, please. So the concept of the resource book provides for information tips on policy measures for controlling HFCs and other F gases in their domestic administration. The next slide, please. So as one example is what was explained by Naomi-san. In our country, we have many different measures to control HFCs emissions. And also, there are countries which introduce financial instruments, awareness raising efforts, laws and regulations, and transparency and tracking, certification and licensing or capacity building, etc. So that these are actually showcased in this life cycle management resource book for policymakers. Especially in the context of developing countries, I think it's very important to see what kind of policy measures can be implemented or designed and implemented in their country context. The next slide, please. So we have developed this resource book by taking up approximately 20 cases from the upstream of the management, and then also downstream, and also cross-cutting ways. Here, I would like to provide some information, just showing maybe 3 examples here. The next slide, please. So in the process of developing this resource book, there are many voluntary submissions for that. Okay, in my country, we have this kind of interesting policy measures. So this is one case that was contributed by the government and also the private sector association in Slovakia. The Slovakian government and also the private sector are controlling the HFC by tracking and also the registration. And then many countries are actually HFCs or trading and also the sites for using. In many different developing countries, that's something unknown. But I think it's nice to have this kind of certification and tracking system. And then, of course, the Slovakian government provides an online tracking system. And when I show this to my colleagues, especially actually my colleagues in Vietnam, they seem to be very much interested having this kind of tracking system because they are now in the process of upgrading their legal system domestically. So this is one example. The next slide, please. The next one is how we are collecting this the unused HFCs. Because in many developing countries, well, after using for refrigerators or air conditioners, it's simply dumped or it disappears somewhere, and then that's leaked or released into the atmosphere. Of course, HFC is a very powerful global warming potential gas. So that of course, for the cost recovery is very difficult in many countries. In this case, this is an Australian practice. Australia is actually the importer's country of HFC. So that when they are using HFCs, so 100% of HFCs, refrigerants are imported. So the government is very wise that they actually impose tax and collect for the obligation-related fees. Then that money is going to be pooled. Then for the collection and also the restructuring, the cost is covered by previously collected fees. Well, if this kind of system is introduced for in the importer's country, maybe this is one way that they can address the cost recovering issue. The next slide, please. This is what actually explained by Inoue-san, Naomi-san. Well, this is what we call the joint crediting mechanism, or JCM. Because again, the destruction of HFC is something people do not want to pay. So that it is simply discharged into the atmosphere. But we want to actually collect and reduce and also the release of these very dangerous gases, so that the government of Japan and also here government of Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, maybe Cambodia in future, we have actually introduced the hardware for the destruction facilities, and also the credits are issued for covering this the cost. So what we want to do is like introduction of decarbonized technologies and also providing finance as well as knowledge sharing through the JCM mechanism. So these are actually just three small examples that are contained in this resource book. But I'm happy to provide this resource book for the further distribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Makoto-san. So we are going to skip to the end of the table for one last presentation before the discussion and Q&A at the end of this event. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed colleague Pham Van Tan. He's the Deputy Director General for Climate Change, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Vietnam.
So thank you, Nathan. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank CCAC, IIASA, Japan's government, UNEP coalition for letting me to present in this side event to share with you some example from Vietnam on how we integrate cooling and revisions in national climate change policies. Next slide, please. As you know that Vietnam, after COP26, we have a very strong movement in Vietnam in terms of climate change policies. So we already approved some policy that go to force from the 1st of January 2022. The first, it is the law on environmental protection adopted in November 2020. That one is going to enter into force since the 1st of January as well. The government decree on GHG reduction and ozone layer protection was approved on the 7th of January 2022. The decision of the Prime Minister on the list of entities have to do GHG inventory and GHG reduction. The circular of the Ministries of Natural Resources and Environment of Vietnam on the implementation of climate change content on the law on environmental protection. We have submitted our first update NDC in September 2022, include HFCs in that NDC. We are going to develop a national climate change strategy up to 2050. That one is after several months of working, we already submitted to the government of Vietnam for consideration. And then we wish that this climate change strategy will be approved in this month. We will do the second update of our NDC and expected to be finished before COP27. So that is the overall what we have done since COP26. Next slide, please. So I would like to show you how we go with HFC's integration and other ODS integration in our system. The first, on the law on environmental protection, we have one article, number 92, on principle and key requirement on ozone layer protection. It provides responsibilities of government system, include ministries, provinces, in management of production, export, import, and utilize of controlled ODS and HFCs. It provides responsibilities of organization, individuals, in doing activities on producing, exporting, importing, using, collecting, transporting, reusing, recycle, and disposing of controlled ODS and HFC. This is the highest level of legal document in Vietnam related to ozone layer protection. Next slide, please. The second, it is the government decree on GHG reduction and ozone layer protection. It was adopted on the 7th of January 2022 with one chapter and 8 articles specific for ozone layer protection relate to control ODS and the roadmap for management of and emulations of control ODS, control of GHG, this one specific for HFC, and the roadmap for management and emulations of controlled GHGs. Registering and reporting the use of controlled substances, requirement and allocation, adjustment, supplementation of the quota for production, import of controlled substances. National plan for management and elimination of controlled substances. Article number 28 is collection, recycling, reuse, and disposal of controlled substances. And the last one is responsibility for management of controlled substances. So this is the 8 articles under the government decrees and its effect from the 1st of January 2022. Next slide, please. The last one is the circular on elaborating implementation of the law on environmental protection on climate change response. It has 1 chapter, list and instructions for using, collecting, transporting, reusing, recycling, and disposing of controlled substances. This is the technical guideline or technical requirement for this ODS management. So we have the law at the top, we have government decree and technical implementation for ministries and own individuals in Vietnam. So last one, the next one, please. Besides integrating the ODS control in our system, the legal system, we developed our climate change strategy up to 2050. So this is the effort that we have done in the last years, but it's supposed to be finished by the end of 2021. But as the COP26, the Prime Minister of Vietnam announced that Vietnam will go to net zero emission by 2050. So after COP26, the government of Vietnam requires us to realize what we have committed in COP26 to the strategies. So this is the first document that realizes the action of Vietnam, how to commit with how to implement what we have committed at COP26, include net zero emission by 2050, methane reduction 30% by 2030, adaptation, coal phase out, and also some other initiative commitment in Vietnam. So we, at technical level, we have to translate that commitments into the real activities. So we have, for mitigation, we identified 87 options or measures to implement from now up to 2050, include for reducing control ODS and other HFCs as well. We do for 5 sectors, and you can see that each 5 years we have the number for each sector. That one is the maximum number of GHG emission each sector can be emitted by that year, like 2020, 2025, 2030, etc. So based on this, we will revise our NDC again. Currently, our updated NDC submitted to the UNFCCC in 2020. Our total level of reduction is 27% compared to business as usual. But with this one, after we commit to get net zero, the number increased up to more than 40%, from 27% up to 40%. You can see that big effort from Vietnam. And beside that, in 2030, we also put the number, the total GHG emission each sector can be emit. And then this one is very easy for us to do MRV in that years. And then it provides also the cost for reducing greenhouse gas in Vietnam. So last slide, next slide, please. So you can see that Vietnam has seriously implemented its responsibility required by Montreal Protocol, Kigali Implementation, Amendment, Paris Agreement, and its commitment at COP26, and considered all need to be done at the same time because it supports each other. The requirements have been integrated in domestic legal system as well as in long-term development strategy in Vietnam. So the climate change strategy is, we consider that it's a long-term development strategy. Vietnam consider integrating requirement in the domestic legal system is the best way to collect efforts of whole government, organization, individuals toward low carbon development getting net zero by 2050. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tan, for that excellent presentation. So that concludes the presentations for this event. We're now going to move on to a discussion in this panel, and then loop in the question and answer for the remaining time. At this point, I would like to introduce the final member of our distinguished panel, Dr. Hak Mao, Director of the Department of Science and Technology and the National Council for Sustainable Development with the Ministry of Environment of Cambodia. And Dr. Mao, I'd like to begin with you, since you haven't had a chance to speak yet. First question, so Cambodia is, we know, deeply committed to taking action to accelerate the transition to energy efficient, climate-friendly cooling. Could you tell us a little bit about how this fits into your country's energy and development program and thinking?
Thank you very much. I just would like to change my role. I'm the director of the Department of Climate Change. I moved from Department of Science and Technology to Climate Change. First I would like to express my sincere thanks to the co-organizer for organizing these important events. I personally had a big confusion between climate change and ODS. And right now I feel that these two become approaching. We have seen that after Paris Climate Agreement 2015, increasing climate action has been taking action. I think almost every country, as we see from our colleague, Vietnam developed a lot of policy and strategies. It's similarly to Cambodia. After COP in Paris, we developed a number of documents. First, I would like to share the updated nationally determined contribution we developed in 2020. This document expects to reduce emission around 42% compared to base year by 2030. And the activity in order to reduce emission, we also propose national coaling action plan. So this is very important policy document that we take national coaling action into account. Besides that, in 2021, the same in December 2021, Cambodia developed a long-term strategy for carbon neutrality, and we expect to achieve net zero emission by 2050. It is very important document for the countries. The analysis also taking into account not only emission reduction, but also economic benefits, environmental sustainability, job creation, and also adaptation benefits. And in this document, we also prioritize the development of cooling action. It's also important for the countries. I also wish to share that Cambodia has been flagged by the coalition of the UN agencies as one of the countries where the workers are more impacted by increase in temperature. Therefore, the cooling is the critical issue for Cambodia. The energy efficiencies and climate-friendly cooling solutions are expected to deliver large economic benefits as well as numerous co-benefits, including human health and energy security. So the phase down of HFC in the cooling sectors, coupled with energy efficiency, renewable energies, and demand reduction measures will be double in climate change benefits. Of course, Cambodia also developed the first energy efficiency policies. It is a very important document for the country, and I think it is the reflection in our statement when we joined the COP26. We also launched a number of events in order to promote energy efficiencies and also energy competition in business sectors, university, and also public building. It is another message to the public that every people can join in order to reduce emission and also to save the energies. From September 2020, Cambodia started to develop national cooling action plan. And frankly speaking, it a lot of confusion for us when we develop this. And we have a lot of discussion with the expert and how to move this action plan ahead. And it takes a number of months for this process. And the development of our National Cooling Action Plan. First, of course, we established the project steering committees, and then, of course, we recruit a consultant to support us. And one of the important things, we need to conduct a survey in order to collect information from different institutions and at national and also subnational level. And the survey time-consuming, and we didn't expect that we can finish the development phase with a short period of time. However, we try our best, especially with the commitment from the relevant line ministry, and also we have our supporting policy, as I said, the updated NDC. Of course, still right now we are at the final stage. We're just waiting for the approval of our UNCAP, and the development of this action. Of course, we gone through a number of consultation, and also we need, especially intensive discussion with international consultants. You know, since we conduct emission reduction, and also we propose different action in order to reduce emission from these sectors. And you know, with our difficult data in the country, you know, this discussion is very intensive, and also very time consuming. Under our UNCAP, we focus on 5 main activities, including building space, space cooling, food cold chains, healthcare cold chains, mobile air conditioning, and processing cooling. And we propose in 3 different steps: 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. The target our action plan until 2040. And you know, we also have a bit discussion. You know, when we develop such kind of long-term action plan, we worry about the implementation. You know, normally action plan 5 years, 10 years, I think also the longest. So a lot of discussion made for the development process. However, I really appreciate that we could develop this document happens, and of course we get strong support from different line ministry, and our UNCAP, of course, it go in line with the existing policy and strategies, especially the key government policy, updated NDC, and even long-term strategies, as well as energy efficiency policy and master plan of the government. So. Right now, we stand ready to translate this UNCAP to concrete implementation, and we hope that we're waiting for all our partners to participate with us. And I'm happy with our Japan colleague that work very concrete with our country. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I've got some other questions, but maybe I could follow up with you on the implementation side, because I think that's really an interesting point about thinking about implementation on such a long-term strategy. How are you addressing that, or have you addressed that internally? Are there any good practices, I think, that maybe you could draw from that at this point, that other countries could benefit from?
Thank you very much. For our long-term, after we develop our long-term strategy, we also develop our long-term strategy implementation plan. You know, strategy is just strategy, but we need to identify how to move ahead with the strategies, and then the implementation plan conducted. And you know, when we develop our updated NDC, of course, we mobilize a lot of resources in order to implement, and significant improvement of the implementation of our updated NDC, it can bring to a good example for us, or lesson learned for us to implement the long-term strategies. And you know, right now the implementation plan is in place, and of course we have different we classify in different stage and different stakeholders and different implementing agencies, and also the resource need in order to implement this. And we expect that with this clear implementation plan, of course, it can drive our country to move ahead with this long-term strategies.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn now to our colleagues from Japan, and this is for either of you or both of you to take. A couple of questions. One, I'd be interested to know, in your own words, why Japan is leading on the issue of addressing banks in particular. I mean, you talk about life cycle assessments, and that's absolutely critical to managing refrigerants. But what is it about banks in particular that has caused Japan to take a lead on this issue? And within that, can you kind of describe the scope or the scale of the emissions from this particular source of refrigerants? And then second question, take them in whatever order. If countries are interested in collaborating with Japan on life cycle management, what kind of resources or tools are available to them?
Okay. Thank you for your question. That's a very good question, and then I'm trying to answer. So why we are focusing on this? I think there are many aspects, but I think it's partly because this is very important in our emissions. The emissions of Japan currently we are seeing 7 years subsequent reduction. Because of many factors, but at some point we have seen some difficulties in reducing, and then that was partly because the emission of the HFCs actually. And then other GHGs like CO2 has been successfully reduced, but fluorocarbons, especially from banking and then bank sector, and then it seems that the collection process, the system was not working to some extent, and then there has been emission in that sector. So that's why we have developed and then amended the law to control those emissions from the bank, and then we did it. So it's that is. Yeah, that's the answer, I guess. And that's in the scale, I'm not sure actually, but my colleague is. I wonder if my colleague can answer, but 福田君なんかわかる？急に聞かれた。Okay. So he was not prepared, but it's not a well, 90% or more is CO2 in Japan among the GHG. So fluorocarbon is basically not big deal. Well, not big proportion, but still it's giving impact on the whole overall trend. And that we think it's that makes us real serious about doing this. So regarding the resources, maybe I wonder if you can. The second question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to responding to the first question from my also perspective, I think that there are lots of benefit of working on HSA bank issues. It is a problem. It is an issue of climate change, but it is, as we have mentioned, this is a downstream issue. So that we are working with, for example, like waste management communities, and it's related to for example, e-waste and treatment, also like a vehicle land end of life treatment. So that that is actually coupled with many different activities with extra benefits. So that's something we can also highlight for the importance of working on bank issues. Resource part, we have many different programs. One significant and very sort of like distinguished one is like a joint crediting mechanism. Well, the government of Japan is providing sort of like this time like a subsidy program, financial support program to introduce the decarbonized technologies. Well, this one is, for example, like the destruction facilities introduced at cement kilns or like waste incinerators or dedicated for the destruction facilities. So that already in Vietnam and the Philippines and Thailand, we have already introduced, and we want to do more. And also about not only about the financial contribution, but also technical cooperation. Because domestically we have a long history of fluorocarbons management, so that our experts, not only from the government side, but also the private sector side, we have a huge community of fluorocarbons control and also the life cycle management. So that together with the private sector colleagues, we are closely working with, for example, private sector and academia in Vietnam, Cambodia, and other countries. So this is something we can offer as Japan's strength for this issue. Thanks.
I don't think you mentioned the name of the the funding mechanism.
Oh, JCM, Joint Crediting Mechanism. Yeah.
All right, write that down. If you want to support from Japan. Anyways, thank you very much.
Sorry, in response to that JCM, so just would like to share with you the projects is now going on in Vietnam and Philippines with regards to the collection and destruction of fluorocarbon in the cooling sector. So just for information, thank you.
There we go. Turning now to Mr. Tan, just one question. It was a very impressive presentation and a very detailed strategy that you've outlined with concrete numbers going forward. I understand you've got a number of projects underway, municipal cooling strategies, other good examples, pilot projects in your country. Working in furtherance of achieving the objectives in your detailed plan, are there any particular examples, good practice examples from your strategy development or these projects that you're implementing in Vietnam that you think other countries could profit from and take up to increase their action on HFCs?
So thank you very much for the question that how the project can help. So as you see that the rate of the urbanization in Vietnam is increasing very fast. From 40% currently, we will increase up to 45% in 2025 and 50% in 2030. So rising temperature, economic growth, and higher rates of urbanization are increasing the demand for cooling in Vietnam. So without intervention, emission from cooling will increase. And today, as you see that 99.53% of Vietnam population can access to electricity grid. But only 10% from that have air conditioner. So with economic growth, the rate of household have air conditioner will increasing very fast. So we see that it is the huge areas that we should focus on. So that's why we work with many countries, development partners. It includes Japan, UNEP, CCAC, and many others as well, to see how to deal with this matter, the emergency matter in Vietnam. We see that sustainable cooling is priority for our government, and we have ambitions to develop policy at national level to deliver on it. So we have selected 3 cities in Vietnam. One is Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam. Another one is the big city in southern part of Vietnam, is Cần Thơ. And another one is in middle areas of Vietnam, is Tam Kỳ. You may not know about that, but Vietnam is a long country, so that Tam Kỳ is in the middle. So we select 3 cities to do the pilot projects for develop the urban cooling plans. One in the north, one in center, and one in the south. So lesson learned from that 3 cities will be replicated to other cities in Vietnam as well. So through that, I would like to thank the supporters for us to implement that project in Vietnam, and I wish I can share with you the lesson learned from that cities, maybe in the next COP27, how we go with the successful implementations of the project in pilot projects in the 3 cities for urban cooling plan in 3 cities, and how it is applied to other cities in Vietnam as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to turn to, and I'm looking forward to those examples in Egypt. So we'll hold you to that. Mr. Tan. Invite you to the next side of it. Pallav, I'm going to turn to you with one quick question, then I'm going to stand up and start handing out the microphone for an audience Q&A. You have no small task here of answering this question in the next 2 minutes. There's been a lot of talk in this panel about the link to energy efficiency. And I was thinking, you are potentially the best person here to really talk about how refrigerants link to energy and energy consumption, and the impacts of choice of refrigerants and choice of cooling technologies have on energy consumption, how potentially we can profit from that link to achieve additional action towards HFC phase out and climate mitigation.
Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. So definitely, this transition towards low GWP as well as alternative refrigerant is linked with the energy efficiency. We have finished, one study in 2020, late in 2020, and we have analyzed that what will be the impact of enhancing energy efficiency along with the HFC phase down. And what we have observed is that the energy efficiency potential is more than, due to the energy efficiency of cooling technologies and HFC phase down, the global electricity demand could be reduced by more than 20% in the period 2050 and beyond. Because if you look at, for example, room air conditioners, so you are switching from HFC 410A to HFC 32, and the economic energy efficiency potential is 6% and the technical energy efficiency potential of 12%. But at the same time, if you are also improving the system efficiency, you are using improved heat exchanger or compressor or valves and so on, then the economic energy efficiency potential will increase from 30 to 36%, and the technical energy efficiency potential will be more than 70%. And the same with other cooling technologies in the commercial refrigeration sector. If you have time, then I just want to show you one slide. If you go second last slide of my presentation. Sorry, just look at the second last slide of this presentation. So, what we have done in this study is that, we have taken the penetration of split air conditioners from IEA in different parts of the world, as you can see in this figure here. And then we have estimated the HFC emissions using the Gaines methodology. The way we calculate the emissions is calculating the emissions from the bank and calculating the emissions during the use of the equipment. So definitely, the GWP of HFC 32 is 1/3 of HFC 410A, but you see that what is happening in the period beyond 2050. The emissions are increasing, if you look at the yellow line. So the yellow line shows the transition towards HFC 32, and the most efficient one is transition towards propane. And first time, in the IPCC AR6, we have the GWP for propane, and it is 0.02, negligible. So if we switch instead of HFC 32 to propane, then definitely, the impact on the global warming will be approximately close to 0.1 degrees centigrade. What are the barriers in this? One of the barriers is that several national authorities, they do not allow R290 more than a certain quantity, and technically it is possible. That is shown, with the example of China and India. Like in India, I think 2% or 2 to 3% of the stock is based on R290, and I haven't heard any accident based on this flammability argument. And the same in China also. Their annual sale is 300,000 to 400,000, though it is still very small. but I haven't heard about any accident due to the flammability. I'm not talking about using R290 in large quantities without having safety measures in place. But this needs to be promoted. I mean, at least in the split ACs, having capacity less than capacity 7 kilowatt or something like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I fear I might have opened up a large can of worms there. But we'll see if we can't take this up with the audience questions. So we're going to begin here.
Hello. Hi, this is Neshan Surmeli. I'm an associate director in Guidehouse, and I'm the program manager of a project we have called Cool Up. It's upscaling sustainable cooling in MENA region and Turkey. Firstly, I would like to thank you all. All the presentations were very insightful and very interesting. I also see that there are several parallelisms between the countries that we are working in MENA region and Vietnam, and all the countries that we have heard had really interesting examples. So I would like to ask, considering that also the countries we are working in MENA region, Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, and Turkey, they are also mostly importers of the equipment and the HFCs. Looking at the best practice examples you have in this very obviously interesting report, which we will definitely dive in, can you share your insights? What could be best practice examples that you can suggest to the developing countries in the region which face more or less similar problems? And another question maybe for the modeling team. That was also very interesting. In Cool Up program, we are looking into energy efficiency, but also specifically focusing on the natural refrigerants. And looking at the modeling you did and the scenarios, I would like to ask, did you have any component on financial aspects of this transition or the scenarios, or was it only on technical level? Thank you very much.
Maybe I will take the first question on this financial. So the way we model, I mean, our emissions, particularly for the Kigali Amendment scenario, we run the cost curves. And I mean, unfortunately, I don't have that slide here, but it is available in our published work. What we have observed is that, I mean, the marginal abatement cost, I mean, it is, in 2030, it is higher for non-Annex 1 countries, non-Article 5 countries, industrialized countries. And there are cheaper options available for developing countries. I mean, there are also, due to the energy efficiency benefit, there are also some negative cost, options available by 2030. Definitely by 2050, with the increasing emission, the cost is also going up in both the, I mean, Article 5 and non-Article 5 countries. So this kind of analysis we have done, and it is available in an open access article. I can share the link.
Okay, I'm the one. Thank you very much. Well, there are many best practices, good practices, but one thing from my own experiences, so that the refrigerants issues, well, that is actually pretty cross-cutting. So that for example, environmental ministry, they're working very hard, but this needs to be actually backed up with, for example, like the industry ministries, and also the industrial associations and the private sectors, and that actually will cut across different sectors. And also, as I mentioned, this is more like upstream issue, middle stream issue, and downstream issue. So if I explained about the widespreadness of this issue, people really seems to be they feel daunting. This is a daunting thing. But I think while it probably takes a little more time, but I think it's good to start with like reaching out for different stakeholders. And if it is, then I think the countries started crystallizing this networks and also the norms into legal and also the planning instruments, as the Vietnamese government, also Cambodian government provided in this meeting. So I think this takes time, but I think there are lots of things you can do, you have to do, and I think you are willing to do probably. So that's my response.
Okay, so since Mr. Kato and Naomi mentioned a lot many times about Vietnam, so I don't know if it's best practice or not, but we can tell you how we have done with it. First, with support from many countries, include Japan, we do a lot of awareness raising. Communication, the many program that we raise awareness for different level, and we see that it is responsibilities of the introducer, the producer, the user, and many others as well. And then we put it in the government requirement, like you see that now we put in the law, so that it's become legal responsibility. So from volunteers that we do in the few years ago, and now we put it in the legal requirement. And as Mr. Kato also mentioned, that it's cross-cutting. So the role of the ministries for coordinate on such kind of activities. And then we put the system that we can manage it online, like how many kilo of the HFC or ODS can import and where it go, and then etc. So anytime we can access that data, and then we can see how it go, and then we manage that. So it is what we have done so far in Vietnam. Thank you very much for the question. Thank you.
I think since colleague is share very best practice, I also similar said as Vietnam said, I don't think it is a best practice, but maybe it also good practice for other countries. I think that cooperative approach is very important. We need to get different stakeholder participation, both line ministry, private sectors, and academia. And also awareness raising and capacity building is very important. We have to make the user understanding what the impact and what we want to get from them. And beside that, I don't think it is applicable for all country. But country like Cambodia, we get support from the donors, and then for the user who want to change the system, we provide incentive scheme. So I think it is not that applicable for all, but it also good if we can provide this. Thank you.
I totally agree with the other guest speakers' opinion, and I just would like to share with you my experiences. I just attended the capacity building program that we had, and together with Kato-san, and then it was very, very sector specific, and they were talking about how to tighten the pipe, and then how to make it firm so that leakage will not occur. Something like that is very, very. It's not something best practice. It's not, doesn't look like that, but it's not flashy, it's not colorful, but that's very important. And then that's what they were having a good time among them. They are very experts, and they share experiences. I think, and then together, that is a technical aspect, and then also the political aspect, and then both sides can be a driver and then make it happen. That's the very, very simple picture, but very, very important. Hard to say best practices, but we need to see such a sectoral approach. Thank you.
Very good question that spurred a lot of comment. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the? No?
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Kim, I'm with the Environment Investigation Agency, and I have a pretty technical question from a colleague who's not in the room, who's been watching this online. She asked regarding the Air 290 slide, she notes that emission from R32 increase with those from system with, sorry, I'm not a specialist on that question, so I hope it's clear what I'm asking, but with R290 decrease after 2030, and she asked if whether national government panelists are considering leapfrogging HFCs, including HFC 32, in smaller split AC to R. I'm sorry, is this clear or? Because so basically she asked if you are considering reducing HFC, including HFC 32, in smaller split, especially in light of the recent change to standards, which allows for safe use of larger charge size, leading to more energy efficient systems. Is this clear? Should I ask her for more details?
Maybe,
Sorry.
I will try to answer your question. And another possibility is that, she can also write me an email, and I will explain in that. But I would like to mention here that all the 3 lines I have shown here, either the baseline, either the HFC 32 or R290, in the baseline, in the initial years, like in 2020, we have around 40% of the global stock is based on HFC 32, and that is already considered in all the 3 scenarios. And in 2017, it is something around 34 to 37%. That is the global stock based on HFC 32. Yeah, that's what I want to say here.
Okay, she'll follow up with an email probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much.
She can contact me. Yeah.
Great.
I'm fairly confident I know which of your colleagues asked that question. That's what I love about the Montreal Protocol community. When they start talking refrigerants, you feel like you're in a calculus class. R290, for example, is propane. But it's really easy to slip into code. But good question from Claire, I'm assuming. Finn? Oh, well, okay, I was wrong. Any other questions from the audience?
Yes, my name is Nuria from Alcott, a project developer for emission reduction projects. The question is regarding you mentioned that you may produce or generate carbon credits from the deployment or collection and destruction of HFC. The question is whether the Japan government and the fund prepare this or use this capacity building providing to the countries, whether they plan or may use the credits for internal commitments, for the government commitments, or are planning to make any transfer for these carbon credits?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, as I mentioned, we have already are having projects in Vietnam and Philippines, and that it is related to the fluorocarbon collection and then destruction scheme. And then basically we are trying to introduce HFC reduction facility. So yeah, and then try to reduce the emission, and then that we try to get that as a credit and then use it for reduction. But anyway, that is the basic scheme. But we have capacity building projects in relation to that, accompanying with these objectives. So yes, we are having that. So, but in detail, maybe, yeah. Thank you.
So I would like to say that how Vietnam and Japan can work together to create the carbon credit under the joint credit mechanism, JCM. Maybe example that you may apply for the countries and others as well. So basically is that we see the potential for reduction of GHG, like either from cooling or other energy efficiency as well. So the project developers will come work with companies in Vietnam and identify the potential, and then they propose the methodology. Then we have committee between two countries, see that reduction is real based on which methodology they apply. Normally we apply the CDM methodology that already approved by the executive board, or we develop the new methodology. Then the credit after the government of Japan supports the fund for companies in Vietnam to implement that. Then we create the credit, and that credit can be transferred to others. So that is the practice we do. And through that, we receive the support for reducing energy, for example. And then we get the technology. And through that, we get the capacity building for the developer, for the implementer, and for the government side, that we can see that how to do MRV in real practice. So that is what we have done several years so far. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. A wonderful question. Again, just proves the incredible depth of experience and knowledge we have on this panel today. We could probably keep talking for quite a while longer. Unfortunately, we have reached the time limit for this session. So I want to thank all of you here physically and in the Twitterscapes who are joining us for this panel during the intersessional. Please join me in a final round of applause for our panelists. Good luck with the rest of the negotiations this week.
Sorry, just at one point, maybe you can leave, but because in response to your question that Japan's like a proportion of the emission of HFC, it's a 4%. 4% of the total emission is from HFCs in Japan. It's very small portion, but actually that is increasing. One of the few